Good morning, sir. Shall I start with, sir? Good morning, sir. Am I audible? Am I audible, sir?
You are audible. You are audible. You are audible.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Good morning, sir, and good morning, students. Today we'll start with the seminar on the essentials of clinical evaluation in dentofacial deformities. This is a part of the series of seminars on orthognathic surgeries. So the objective of the treatment of any orthognathic surgery patients will be based on the function, aesthetics, and the stability of the treatment. So you should achieve the essential function and acceptable aesthetics, and a stable result has to be produced. So the decision making in this group of patients is very crucial. So there are three groups of patients you'll be encountering. So first will be the normal skeletal relationship with the dental malocclusion. So they are routinely treated by the orthodontic treatment. And group 2 is a mild to moderate skeletal discrepancies. So they will go for a dental compensation or a growth modification when the age of presentation based on that the growth modification can be done. In group 3, the moderate to severe skeletal discrepancies. So the patients will have a facial imbalance. So they need a combined surgical and orthodontic care. So the orthodontic teeth placement dictates the surgical movement and the facial changes. So how exactly the teeth are positioned as a result of orthodontic treatment. So that will decide the amount of surgical movement has to be acquired. So a careful pre-op assessment of the musculoskeletal deformities before starting with the treatment, orthodontic treatment, is essential for a stable functional results. The stability of the treatment outcome depends upon the occlusal stability. So it is a result of sum of all the forces acting against the teeth, as per Enloe. And the teeth, so in order to achieve, for example, when the patient is prepared for a pre-surgical orthodontic care, orthodontically, so tooth extrusion to correct an open bite, it will lead to a poor stability. So that is for an example. So a stable result has to be achieved. Here, the communication between the orthodontist, the surgeon, and the patient is very essential. To get a realistic treatment outcome. So the surgeon to orthodontist has to communicate well, and the patient has to be informed well about the treatment. So it is a very crucial in achieving a proper result. The phases of treatment, once the patient is prepared for surgery, so or the surgical plan is done. So the pre-surgical orthodontics involves the orthodontic band placement. So any third molar extraction has to be done 2 to 3 weeks prior to the placement of the bands, and followed by preoperative or a preparatory orthodontic phase, which lasts for 9 to 18 months. So for achieving a element 1, that's Andrews element 1 positioning of the tooth. So teeth alignment. So we'll talk about the Andrews element 6 elements later in this lecture. So teeth alignment and optimal position of the arch, which lasts for 9 to 18 months. Then a surgical phase, which is followed by the healing phase of 4 to 6 weeks. Then a post-surgical orthodontics, that is lasts for 3 to 6 months. So always the fine tuning of the occlusion is carried out in the post-surgical phase and followed by orthodontic band removal and a retention phase. These are the stages in treatment of the patient when undergoing a orthodontic and orthognathic surgery. So in the patient evaluation, so general patient evaluation, psychosocial evaluation, aesthetic facial evaluation, radiographic assessment, and assessment of the study models and the temporomandibular joint evaluation. Each has its own importance and it has to be carefully examined and careful evaluation has to be done. So first consultation is always done with the orthodontist. So he is the one or he or she is the one who sees the patient first. So the problem list is made. So whether the patient is having a skeletal deformity or a dental deformity, then followed by the surgical consultation and a definitive surgical consultation. So, and then the interdepartmental consultation disciplines like periodontics and prosthodontics also plays a important role in orthognathic surgery. So general patient evaluation, medical history, the anesthetic risk, any congenital syndromes has to be ruled out. And the dental evaluation is important because the commitment of the patient for a future treatment, future dental treatment, patient may have a poor periodontal health or a missing teeth, so he is not compliant for a further treatment. So then your surgical treatment itself will go for a failure. So the commitment for the future dental treatment has to be assessed, and how to manage the missing teeth. So whether how you are going to maintain the space or you are going to close the space decision has to be made at the stage. The periodontal evaluation, the periodontist plays a very crucial role because if not necessarily the skeletal repositioning is important, but the gingival health, if it is inadequate, then the vascularity of the segment will be compromised. So it will lead to a poor treatment outcome. So periodontal health is very important for an orthognathic surgery. So the occlusal, so the evaluation of the mastication, swallowing, and any presence of the mouth breathing habits and obstructive sleep apnea has to be ruled out. Here, the very important and often missed evaluation is the psychosocial evaluation. Here, it often leads to a dissatisfied patient. One thing is because of the failure of the clinician to inform the realistic outcome and the aesthetic result. The realistic aesthetic result, if it's failure of the clinician side to inform the patient, sometimes the patient can be over optimistic. They might want an exorbitant or a drastic change. So that is not possible. So that has to be prior informed to the patient, or a psychological counseling has to be taken prior before proceeding for the surgeries. Many a times the patient comes back and the repeat surgeries are done. So it can be avoided. So reason for unrealistic patient expectations. In patients with acquired facial deformities, so who had undergone previous surgeries or history of trauma, so they need a careful counseling. And one other group of patients due to the external motivations. So sometimes the patient can come with the expectation that if they go for an orthognathic surgery, they can have a professional advancement or a career advancement, or social adjustments can be made. So that group of patients are mainly by external motivations. So they are best not to treat them. The best group of patients are the internal motivated patients, are excellent and best to treat. So this questionnaire has to be filled up by the clinician after conversing with the patient. We can see that the nature of the dentofacial deformity, whether the patient is able to define, the duration of the concern, the aesthetic severity, functional severity, patient ability to define the dentofacial deformity, and patient's perspective, whether he is not able to adjust with, because of the deformity, is having a social adjustment difficulties, or patient is having a vocational aspirations, whether he can go for a treatment, then he will get improved, and unrealistic expectations of orthodontic treatment. Here, when you look at that, the question number 6 to 8. So when the patient is having a low level response of question number 6 to 8, then they are definitely a external motivated patients. Those group of patients has to be carefully managed, or better not to treat those group of patients. So if first 4 or 5 level questions, when the number is less than 4 responses, so they can be go for a counseling, and we can manage them with the proper counseling. It's about the psychosocial evaluation, which is very important and often missed clinical evaluation in case of managing a orthognathic surgery patients. So coming to the major portion of our discussion today, the facial aesthetic evaluation. So here the frontal aesthetics is very important. So patients, how the patient presents, the primary importance of the frontal aesthetics. You have to depend on the balance and proportions than the numerical values. So how proportionate is the face, one half of the face to the other half, and whether the vertical halves, upper third, middle third, and lower third, how proportionate they are than the numerical values, and the face in relation with the rest of the body. So the corporofacial relationship is essential. So facial proportions to the rest of the body, and how the posture of the patient. So this evaluation has to be carried out in detail. So we have to keep in mind 2 factors. One, because of the orthognathic surgery, so when you do a correction, how much the abnormal structures will be get corrected, and the influence of the surgery and orthodontics on the normal facial structures. So only the mandibular deformity is there. When you are correcting the mandibular deformity, how much change in the soft tissue envelope, how much change is going to happen in the rest of the normal structures in the face. Here, you all have to remember one ratio. It's called as the golden ratio, which is way back in 300 BC. So it is described by Euclid of Alexandria. So this ratio is an aesthetic ratio. Most of the aesthetic surgeons try to achieve this ratio. So of late it has gained more important. This golden ratio, what does it say? As per the Euclid's words, a straight line is said to have been cut in extreme and mean ratio, when as the whole line is to the greater segment, so is to the greater to the lesser. What does it mean? So here, if we draw a straight line and divide it into A and B segments, A segment is the bigger segment and B is the smaller segment. So the sum of A plus B to the greater segment A, the ratio is equivalent to the greater segment to the lesser segment. So the sum of A plus B to the A is equivalent to A to B. So that ratio is applicable on the facial structures wherever we are encountering. So this ratio has to be applied, so whether we are able to achieve that ratio or not. So this ratio is called as the golden ratio. So this the ratio value is approximately, they say, is 1.6. So whenever you are evaluating the patient, the evaluation of the patient is carried out in the natural head position. So natural head position is nothing but, so is a standardized reproducible position where the Frankfurt horizontal and the interpupillary line are parallel to the floor. So patient is seated in upright and visual axis in the horizontal plane. So it's a reproducible position. So the interpupillary line and the Frankfurt horizontal are parallel to the floor. So the clinical examination, radiograph taking, and the photographs of the patient has to be taken in the natural head position. And the lips should be relaxed and the centric occlusion teeth should be in centric occlusion. There are two exceptions to this. Whenever the patient is having a vertical maxillary deficiency, so they tend to overclose the mouth, and the patient's having a deep bite. So these are the two groups. We need not be in a centric occlusion whenever you are taking a photograph or examination of the patient. So in those group of vertical maxillary deficiency and the deep bite patients, we have to slightly increase the bite, or a patient, get the patient to the centric relation and examine the patient to get the realistic deficiency values. The photographs has to be taken. The frontal view is in rest, the lips in repose, and the facial frontal view with a smiling face, and the profile, right and left profile photographs, and another photograph of a 3/4 oblique view and submental view. In case of a mandibular asymmetry, submental view has to be taken. So these are the basic photographs for a in a pre-surgical phase we have to take for orthognathic surgery patients, and measure the abnormal values using a millimeter and the caliper. In frontal analysis, the facial form, the transverse dimensions, facial symmetry, the vertical relations of upper, middle, and lower third, the lips and the nose are assessed. The facial form, when you look at that, the height to width ratio gives a facial harmony. So the height is 30% more compared to the width. So females have 1.3:1 and males have 1.35:1. So height is 30% more than the width for an ideal ratio. And the bigonial and bizygomatic width. So the bizygomatic width is 30% more than the bigonial, or the bigonial width is lesser compared to a bizygomatic width for a aesthetically appearing face. The top one is the bitemporal width, which is comparatively lesser than the bizygomatic width. Different type of faces you'll encounter. So the short and square face. So some individuals will have a short and square face. Most likely they can have a class 2 deep bite. Likely that they can have a mesentric hyperplasia. They can have a vertical, not necessarily all individuals, but likely presence when you have a short and square face. Vertical maxillary deficiencies and macrogenia. And long narrow face, they can have a vertical maxillary excess, narrow palatal vault, narrow nose, mandibular anteroposterior deficiency. They can have a microgenia, and they can land up with the anterior open bite. The long narrow face and short and squarish face. These two types of face you can encounter. Transverse facial proportions. So the 5 parallel lines, the 5 equal divisions are made in the transverse plane. So it's called rule of fifth. You all are aware of that. The 5 equal parts, helix to helix, each 5 equivalent. 1 second. Each 5 equivalents to the width of the eye. So outer fifth is the center of the helix to the outer canthus, and the medial third, fifth, is the outer canthus to the inner canthus, and the middle one is between the two inner canthus. So the intercanthal distance is 35 millimeters, and the interpupillary distance is 65 millimeters. So the line through the inner iris falls through the corner of the mouth. So the inner canthus is equivalent to the in between the width of the alar base, and the line through the inner iris falls through the commissure. So intercommissural width is equivalent to the distance between the inner iris, between the iris. So the 5 equal parts. So outer canthus to the lateral helix, inner canthus to the outer canthus, in between the iris, and the proportionate values for the alar base and the commissures. So the transverse facial dimensions, you can see when patients presents with the increased bigonial width. So in those group of patients, they'll have a mesenteric hypertrophy. So when the bizygomatic width is less compared to the bigonial width, patient can have a skeletally wider mandible, or the patient can have a mesenteric hypertrophy. A clinical examination and radiographic assessment will get to know that which is the problem area. So when you look at the patients, as I was mentioning, that intercanthus, the line through the intercanthus falls on the alar base. So in some group of patients, they will have a wide alar base. So when you are planning for a superior repositioning, so this wider alar base will further worsen. So that has to be taken care. So when you are planning for a superior repositioning of the maxilla. Next, coming to the facial symmetry. So the midline points of glabella, nasal bridge, pronasal, philtrum of the upper lip, dental midlines, and cogonium. So the face is divided and the proportionate values are recorded. We have to assess the dental and skeletal midlines and the midline of the mandible with the chin. Assessment of the occlusal cant. So the study shows that when the cant is approximately 3-degree cant, only a 50% of the professionals or the orthognathic surgeons and the orthodontists are able to identify the amount of cant. When the cant level is above 4 degrees, then it is above 90% of the professionals, the orthognathic surgeons and the orthodontists are able to identify the problem. So how you measure the occlusal cant? So ask the patient to bite on a tongue blade, so the wooden spatula, and on the molar region, and take a facial photograph in a 1:1 ratio. And here, provided the deformity is in the dentofacial region, not in the cranial area. So if it is in the lower 1/3 level, the cant is present, then you can use the interpupillary line as a draw a horizontal line on the interpupillary region on the radiograph and get the parallelism. So if the 4.5-degree cant is there, then it is an appreciable cant. So it needs to be addressed by the both combined orthodontic and orthognathic surgery. So the cant can also be measured by using a Fox plane, or you can take a PSF, which can give you the asymmetry values, or you can go for a stereolithographic models with the help of a CBCT guided stereolithographic models, which will clearly show the amount of cant present. So the values has to be recorded, and accordingly the treatment plan has to be modified. More common in case of a class 3 malocclusion. The vertical assessments, facial thirds from trachea to the glabella for upper 1/3, and glabella to the subnasal, and subnasal to the soft tissue menton. So the proportional values has to be assessed, and the lower third has in turn divided into upper 1/3 and the lower 2/3, subnasal to the stomion superior and stomion inferior to the menton. The scleral show. So normally when the patient is visualizing the patient with the facial fullness, so you will not, the sclera will not be visible below the irids. When the patient is having a mid-face deficiency, you will have the picture on your right shows that excessive scleral show. So depicts that they have a deficient middle third of the facial skeleton. So that has to be addressed by advancement of the maxilla or any augmentation. This contour of the middle third of the face of the cheekbone, nasal base, and lip contour. So these structures in the midface, like harmony of the structures in the midface, like zygomatic bone, maxilla, and alar base with the paranasal region and upper lip has to be assessed. So that will give you a clinically, it will give you a plan that how we are going to proceed with whether only the maxilla has to be addressed or mandible also has to be addressed. So the cheekbone, lip, and nasal base contour. So the line starts when you take either in the frontal view or in the lateral view. So the line starts anterior to the ear, extends forward through the cheekbone, and then runs anterior-inferiorly over the maxilla, adjacent to the alar base of the nose, and ending laterally to the commissure of the mouth. So it should form a smooth curve. So the cheekbone area includes the zygomatic arch, the middle area, and the infraorbital region. And the medial most point is the maxillary point, which gives the fullness of the face. So when you see from the front or the lateral view, it should form a smooth curve, and the nasal base and the upper lip contour. So it just comes to the maxilla and just turns from the commissure side. So curves laterally to the from the corner of the mouth. So when you look at the patient, so on the picture on the first one, we'll have a smooth curvature. And the second one, you can see there is a double break in the cheekbone nasal base lip contour. One is the deficient maxilla, and another is a prognathic mandible. So this you have to repeatedly practice to get the whether the deficiencies in the maxilla or the mandible or both are having a deficiency. So that can be assessed. In the third picture, we'll have a deficient maxilla. So this is the profile view and the frontal view. This assessment can be made. Cheekbone, nasal base, and lip contour assessment can be made. Here, in the frontal view, the maxillary deficiency will have an interruption only in the maxillary area, the first picture. And in the third picture, you can see that there is a double break. So one is in the deficiency in the maxilla and the excess in the mandible. So that can be assessed. Next, coming to the assessment of the lip. So assess the lip during rest, repose, and in animation. So lower lip is 25% exposure, excessive vermilion show than the upper lip. And the interlabial gap is 3 millimeters. And the intercommissure is equal to the interpupillary lip, or the line through the inner iris pass through the commissures. So that should be equivalent for ideal proportions. So the lip assessment. So the morphology of the lip depends upon the how much is the vestibular depth. So how much is the vestibular depth is there. So that decides the morphology of the lip, which in turn depends upon the vertical positioning of the roots of the anterior teeth. So whether it's a prognathic, proclined anteriors or retroclined anteriors, which will alter the soft tissue morphology overlying that. So reasons for the asymmetry of the lips. One is that intrinsic lip deformity. Patients who are operated cleft lip and palate, so they will have an intrinsic deformity, or any traumatic injuries. Patients is having a facial nerve dysfunction. That is one reason. Or a dentofacial or a skeletal deformities. Dental and skeletal asymmetries can also lead to the asymmetric lips. So the length of a lower lip is ideal one is 20 to 22 millimeters, measured from the subnasal to the stomion superior's upper lip length. And there is ideally there should be a 3 millimeter of the incisal show beneath the upper lip. So the relationship of the upper lip with the central incisor is a very crucial in getting a ideal treatment results. 3 millimeter incisal show beneath the upper lip. The lower lip length is from the stomion inferior to the menton is 40 to 42 millimeters on an average. So how a normal upper lip will have a tubercle slightly hands down inferior to the vermilion on the either side. So the vermilion on either side are slightly superior compared to the tubercle in the middle. So that will be the ideal lip ratio. You will encounter some group of patients who will have a typical lip called as a gull-wing lip. Gull-wing lip, what is? It is a seabird. Gull-wing is a seabird, or it is the terminology is used in manufacturing when they go for an aircraft wings. So this appearance of the lip, gull-wing lip, the tubercle is superior to the vermilion on the either side. So the tubercle of the lip is slightly superior or entirely absent. So here you will get confused between a different set of group of patients. For example, some patients will have a vertical maxillary excess. They will have an excessive incisal show. Vertical maxillary excess will have an excessive incisal show. So, but in a patient with a gull-wing lip also will have an excessive incisal show. So, clinician, when examining the patient in a profile radiograph or in a profile examination, or you take a lateral cephalometric assessment. So, when you see an excessive incisal show, then you will get confused that whether the patient is having a vertical maxillary excess or not. So how to differentiate that? In a normal tooth exposure of the upper lip, so there is an even exposure of the teeth, but it's not like in the gullwing. So in a gullwing lip, the central incisor will have a more exposure because the tubercle is missing or it is superior to the vermilion on the either side, and progressively less exposure on the lateral. You can just see that this picture will give you the clear appreciation of the gullwing lip. So the tubercle will be shorter compared to the lateral. So in the central incisor, there will be an excessive show than the exposure in the lateral region. So that has to be differentiated when you are assessing the dentofacial deformity in a lateral cephalometric radiograph or a profile photograph. So then accordingly, the treatment plan has to be changed. The gullwing lip morphology has to be assessed clearly. The teeth, the symmetry is essential for an aesthetic smile. The lip has to move concentrically and the exposure of the teeth should be even when the patient is smiling in a full aesthetic smile. So there is a minimum of 2 to 3 millimeter of gingival show will be visible at the full exposure. And something called a consonant smile. The curvature of the lower lip line parallels the curvature of the maxillary incisal edges to get a youthful smile. So the incisal edges should be in a parallel to the lower lip edges. So it gets a consonant smile. And one more term you should know is the buccal corridor. The space created between the buccal surface of the posterior teeth and the inner aspects of the oral commissure when the individual is smiling. So there's a buccal corridor, and if it is too high, it will give a dark spots and it will give a less aesthetic smile. Even if it is too little also, it is giving a unnecessary. So the balance has to be managed. So if it is a too much of a buccal corridor, then the maxilla is narrow and it needs to be addressed. Either the dental component is creating the problem or the skeletal component. So the further assessment has to be made. So assessment of the buccal corridor. Asymmetric smile. One, we talked about that before. Facial muscle dysfunction, intrinsic lip deformities like any scarring or a cleft lip palate, and hemifacial microsomia also can have a skeletal, dental, and soft tissue asymmetries. So the extremities can have a asymmetric smile. Now, tooth exposure during smile. So when only the muscle of rhizorius is activated, just slight movement of the commissure will be there. We will not have a sufficient tooth exposure. When all the perioral muscles are activated, the centrifugal movement of the lip happens and have an even exposure of the teeth. The more aesthetic smile can occur. Whenever you have a less aesthetic smile or a minimal exposure of the central incisor, you give a less aesthetic smile. So the teeth are positioned superiorly. So the problem has to, this patient is having a squarish face, a short squarish face. So that needs to be addressed. So normally the lower teeth is not exposed in case of when the patient is smiling. When the lower teeth are exposed, then there is a deficiency of the chin or a proclined anteriors, proclined lower anteriors and the deficient chin. So this could be the reason, or sometimes the lip can be hypotonic. The midlines has to be assessed carefully. So the skeletal and dental midlines, the coincidence of the maxillary and mandibular midlines and the mandibular midline to the chin has to be assessed. And when you are planning for a 2-jaw surgery or a single jaw surgery, so either whether we have to address the midline or not to address the midline, when both the jaws are repositioned, the decision can be made at that point. And if you are addressing, so how much other structures will be compromised when moving the dental midline? That we will talk when we are going for a profile analysis by Andrews. So the midline, ideally the midline of the maxillary central incisor should coincide within 2 millimeter of the facial midline. So ideally the 2 millimeter difference, or it should be within the 2 millimeters. Here are 3 things you should know. One is the pitch, yaw, and the roll. So three terminologies. So this will show the three-dimensionally how the middle third of the facial skeleton is positioned. Pitch is that if it is an antero-posterior movement, when the mandible is moved antero-posteriorly, that is the pitch. The anterior-posterior plane adjustment, and yaw is the vertical plane adjustment. So mostly the midline corrections, when there is a midline shift. So this picture in the blue, the line markings shows the yaw. So it's a vertical adjustments, and the roll is the can correction. Roll is the can correction. So it's a transverse plane. So pitch is the anterior-posterior, and yaw is the mediolateral. That's a vertical plane, midline change, and the roll is the correction of the cant. So this, when you are treating a patient with the maxillary and mandibular asymmetries, or both the jaws are involved, so all these factors comes into play, and we have to correct three-dimensionally to get a desired result. Pitch, yaw, and roll. So aesthetic line of dentition and functional line of dentition. Aesthetic line of dentition is what? It follows the surface of the maxillary anterior and the posterior teeth. And the functional line of dentition is the arch form, arch width, and symmetry of the arches. This is the functional line of the dentition. Assessment of the chin. Chin, either it can be three-dimensionally, it has to be assessed. Can be a squarish, tapered chin, symmetry of the chin, relationship of the chin to the vertical structures above, and relation with the mandibular angle and the rest of the lower body. So the relation with the angle and the rest of the lower border of the mandible has to be assessed. And the harmony of the chin complex with the rest of the face, that is the SN Pogonian line. You draw a line connecting the subnasal to the Pogonian, and how exactly the chin is positioned is assessed clinically. And you take a photo three-dimensionally, the size, shape, and position are assessed. Any canting in the lower border, and the labiomental fold and the dental midline has to be assessed. Females will have a narrow chin. The males will have a squarish chin. So the skull shows the difference in the morphology of the gender morphology of the chin. Some individuals will have a knobby chin. So it's like a knobby chin will be there, a narrow chin. So whenever you are planning for a reduction of the chin or an advancement of the chin, sometimes only the advancement will not help such group of patients. We have to split the chin and we have to widen the chin when you are advancing or setback. So this knobby chin has to be taken care when you are going for advancement and setback, whether widening is required or not. The angle formed between the lower lip, the menton, and the chin throat area. This angle is an obtuse angle, 110 degree. It's a chin throat angle. And the distance in the neck chin throat angle to the soft tissue pogonium. This distance, it should be approximately, it is 42 millimeters, neck throat angle to the soft tissue pogonium. So when you are planning for a setback, if this length is compromised, then you have to address properly, because some individuals will have an already the difficulty in airway, or airway difficulty has, if it is preoperatively assessed, then if you're doing a setback, if this length is compromised, then that will further aggravate the condition. This line of the aesthetic line, everybody aware of that? So this line drawn from the tip of the nose to the tip of the chin. So ideally the lower lip is 2 millimeter behind the line, and the upper lip is 4 millimeter behind the line for a pleasing profile. Ricketts aesthetic plane. The lips position in relation to the SN Pogonian plane. So the mandibular anterior-posterior deficiency. So the lips are well ahead, the S1 to the S1 Pogonian plane. And the upper lip is ideally is 3.5 millimeter and lower lip is 2.5 millimeter ahead of the line. In mandibular prognathism, the lips are on the kindly mute. Mic, please.
பொறுமையா ஆடுங்க.
Effect of chin position on this ascent pogonion line.
நீங்க கொடுங்க. நான் என் போன்ல எடுத்தேன். நீங்க நாளைக்கு கார்னர் இல்லாட்டி கொடுங்க, நான் அந்த நிமிஷம் பேசுறேன்.
So here I will continue. So we draw a line drawn from the ascent to the pogonion. So if this here the upper lip position is constant, the position of the upper lip is constant. Only the varying the position of the chin, you can assess where exactly the lips are positioned. You can see the first picture is the chin is positioned behind and it is on the line. Then it is a prognathic chin. So only by varying the position of the chin. So the understanding here is that when the chin position is altered, it will reflect on the structures on the above the chin. So either lips positioning will be altered and the nasal base position can be altered. The labiomental fold. So the lower lip, the chin contour. So it will form a gentle S-shaped curve. So when you look at the patient in the profile on a clinical examination, so it will follow a gentle S, and the lower lip chin angle should be 130 degrees. So the acute angle, if it is angle is more acute, it's a class T malocclusion, class 2. If it is a obtuse angle, it is a class 3 malocclusion. So this curvature of the lip should be appreciated when you are examining the patient and when you are drawing a cephalometric drawing of the soft tissue contour. So this gentle S-shaped curve has to be achieved to get a aesthetic profile. The mandibular angle and the inferior border relationship. So the lower border of the mandible defines the face. So the definition of the chin, the lower border of the mandible and the angle. So that definition is important because that is a break point between the face and the neck. So it gives a typical hourglass appearance with the neck and the mandibular borders. So for a neck aesthetics, any aesthetic surgeons who are planning neck aesthetics or orthognathic surgeons who are doing advancement or setback, if this border is not achieved, in a profile appearance, the patient will not have a pleasing features. So the less defined mandibular borders is mainly one can be a skeletal cause or maybe a laxity of this tissue. The soft tissue laxity can be there, or patient can have a double chin, or patient can have a excessive lipid deposition, lipomatosis, or a low positioned hyoid bone. When the hyoid bone is positioned low, then how much ever correction we do, this lower border of the mandible definition cannot be achieved. The reason is, I'll explain that a little later. So the lower third of the face in this patient will have a less defined lower border of the mandible. Patient is having a vertical excess and the lower the mandibular borders are not defined. If we do an advancement of the maxilla or mandible, then you can have a defined border of the angle and the lower border of the mandible. In patients, some patients will have a less defined lower border, they have a skin laxity. So how you assess the skin laxity is that just gently knead the skin and just try to push and see if you are able to re-achieve the lower border of the mandible and the angle. Then it is only because of the age-related skin laxity that can be corrected by means of a positioning of the altering the position of the aesthetically. The skin correction laxity of the skin can be corrected. The facelift can be done. Or if the patient is having a lipomatosis, we can do a pinch test. So we can do extend the neck and just do a pinch test. Then we can know that the lipid deposition in this area So that's how you differentiate between a skin laxity and a lipomatosis. So there are certain procedures neck aesthetics will improve. For example, the mandibular advancement, genioplasty, and maxillary superior repositioning, any combination of the above three that can improve the neck aesthetics. Or it can worsen the reverse procedures like mandibular setback, reduction, and maxillary inferior repositioning. These procedures can affect the neck aesthetics. And some procedures will not have any effect, like any maxillary advancement or a subtotal anterior maxillary osteotomies or mandibular subapical osteotomies will not have any effect on the neck aesthetics. That's about the pinch test, which I was mentioning to identify the lipid deposition. It's talking about the hyoid bone level. So the hyoid bone, ideally it is 20 millimeter inferior to the lower border of the mandible. So inferior border of the mandible. So if this position is well low, it's below that, then the infrahyoid, suprahyoid muscles are also pulled down, and you will not have a defined boundaries of the lower border of the mandible, chin, or the angle. So we can assess the position of the hyoid bone with the help of a lateral cephalometric radiograph, which can clearly identify the position of the hyoid bone. If the patient is having a inferiorly positioned hyoid bone, if you are planning for any neck aesthetics is planned, cosmetic procedures are planned, better not to proceed with that. Preoperatively, we can assess that. Coming to the glabellar angle, so the intersection of the glabella to the nasion and the nasion to the pronasil. So this angle forms 113 to plus or minus 15 degrees. So this angle will be obtuse or increased when the patient is having a frontal bossing or a depressed nasal septum. The frontal bossing is a reverse slope will be there in case of a frontal bossing. More into the detailed discussion of the nose is not up to this lecture. So certain key points of the nose assessment. So the normal landmarks like tip, infra-tip lobule, columella, alar base, ala, and the supra-tip break and the supra-tip lobule has to be evaluated clinically. The nasal bridge is approximately 5 to 8 millimeter anterior to the globe, and the dorsum of the nose can be a normal, convex, or a concave shape. And the nasal tip can have either the presence assessed for any supra-tip break, any break in the nasal tip has to be assessed, and assessed for the any rotation of the nasal tip, either is a downturned nasal tip or an upturned nasal tip, or presence of a dorsal hump. So the dorsal hump and the downturned nasal tip has to be differentiated. Here, the dorsal hump is an isolated the hump in the nose, and in the downturned nasal tip is usually seen when the patient is having a vertical class 3 malocclusion and the prognathic mandible. So when you are correcting this the skeletal deformity, the nasal tip also is automatically gets corrected. So always when you are planning for orthognathic surgeries, the nose correction has to be dealt in a second stage. Don't go for a nose correction in the same surgery, because some amount of nasal correction can be achieved at the time of surgical correction of the skeletal deformities. Any functional deformity of the nose, deviated nasal septum, hypertrophic turbinates, later nasal polyps has to be assessed. Coming to the next portion of the discussion, the relationship of the globe with the rim. So you draw a line on the anterior most projection from the globe. So anterior cornea. So the vertical line is dropped. The soft tissue over the supraorbital rim. The soft tissue over the supraorbital rim is 10 millimeter anterior to the cornea. So and soft tissue over the infraorbital rim is 3 millimeter behind the cornea. That should be the ideal proportions. So the supraorbital rim to the infraorbital rim. So that's the supraorbital rim is 13 millimeter forward to the infraorbital rim. And the malar eminence is 2 millimeter in front of the cornea. When you look at the profile photograph and you draw a vertical line through that, this vector analysis is called as the globe rim relation, determines the globe rim relationship. You drop a perpendicular, draw a parallel line anterior to the projection of the globe. So that will show that how much is the supraorbital rim is ahead of the globe and the infraorbital rim behind the globe and the position of the malar eminence. This relationship of the globe with the malar eminence was described by Aramchuk in the year 2001. So for a positive youthful vector relationship, so the cheek mass should be in front of the line. And if it is a negative vector, if it is a aging phase, or they will have a cheek mass is behind the line. That is, the malar eminence is behind the line. So ideally, then whether you have to go for an advancement of the maxilla or you go for an augmentation procedure has to be decided. The lateral rim is 8 to 12 millimeter behind the globe, and the infraorbital rim is 2 millimeter behind the globe. The nose projection, this ratio, there is a pronasal to the subnasal and the subnasal to the alar base, the nasal base. Ratio should be ideally 2:1. If the subnasal to the nasal base distance is more, then that means the maxilla is more deficient. So the maxilla is well behind, then it needs to advancement of the nose. Or even the patient is having a short nose and you are planning for a further advancement, then that will further aggravate the problem. So when the patient is having a class 3 and a short nose is there, you plan do a mandibular setback than for a maxillary advancement. Decision can be made based upon the nasal projection and the ratio of the nasal base to the subnasal and subnasal to the pronasal. And when the nose is having an obtuse angle, the large and obtuse nasolabial angle. So when the patient is having an obtuse angle, then decision can be made whether to align the anteriors, whether the first premolar extraction and retraction is required, or second premolar extraction to correct the anterior crowding. Because when you retract the anteriors, then it will further aggravate the problem and it will make it as more obtuse. The inclination between the columella and the upper lip defines the nasolabial angle. So the nasolabial angle and the mandibular deficiency, when there is a deficient, there can be an increased angle. When you advance the mandible, then the problem can be get corrected. And the nasolabial angle and the class 3 malocclusion. So when you do a mandibular setback, this nasolabial angle also gets corrected. Coming to the Andrews 6 elements of the orofacial harmony. Many of our orthodontic colleagues will be well aware of this. So the 6 elements of orofacial harmony. So the element 1 is the optimal tooth to arch characteristics. So the roots of the tooth, both anterior and the posterior tooth, are centered on the basal bone. So this harmony is essential to achieve a stable orthodontic and the surgical results. So the element 1 tooth position, roots are centered on the basal bone and the crowns are inclined so that they interface and the function optimally. Element 2 is a optimal antero-posterior jaw position. So optimal position, so the maxilla is optimally positioned when the facial access points of the element 1 maxillary incisors. So element 1 is always reference is made with the incisors, element 1 incisors are positioned properly. So optimal jaw position, antero-posterior jaw position. So this element 2 analysis alone we'll discuss at the end of the lecture in detail. Element 2. Element 3 is the optimal jaw width. So mandibular width is naturally optimal. So less change happens in the mandibular width. So the line through the distance between the mesolingual cusp of the element 1 maxillary first molars and between the central fossa of the element 1 of the mandibular first molars. This distance should be equivalent for an ideal jaw width. So element 3. Element 4 is the ideal jaw height. So anterior, posterior height should be ideal, and the teeth are positioned in the element 1 relationship. It is the element 4. Element 5 is the optimal chin prominence. So the chin prominence is measured independently of the anterior posterior jaw position. So here the FA point falls on the pogonium. So that should be the, if it is a incisor is positioned in the element 1 relationship, the pogonion and the FA point of the incisor should be in the line. So for an ideal chin prominence. Element 6 is the optimal occlusion. So it is a combination of all the elements. So all these elements are interrelated to get an ideal or acceptable orofacial harmony of the individual. And a stable result can be achieved. So there are 8 key points to be noted when you are planning for a surgery in the clinical assessment stage. First thing is that what is the current and the preferred position of the maxillary dental midline. So what is the present position of the dental midline and where exactly you want the dental midline? That is the yaw orientation. That is in the vertical axis. Means a long axis. So you just position the central incisor. The position of the central incisor decides where exactly you want the central incisor anterior teeth. That determines the aesthetic outcome of the surgery. So that where you want the midline to be positioned, whether you have to move the maxilla bodily, it has to be moved, or whether it has to be rotated. Long twisting. This is a twisting of the maxilla has to be done along the long axis, the vertical axis. So that is a yaw orientation, maxillary dental midline. Next one is the correction of the maxillary can. So it is a roll orientation. That is a horizontal axis. Whether you want to correct the can. So next is the maxillary can correction. And third one is the vertical position of the maxillary incisor. The vertical position in relation with the upper lip during the rest and during the smile. So position of the maxillary incisor crown. So ideally 3 mm of the incisor tip should be visible in case of a rest position. So this maxillary dental midline, can correction, and vertical orientation of the maxillary incisor. And next one is the horizontal position of the maxillary incisor. So that is the anterior-posterior position. Horizontal position of the maxillary incisor with reference to the upper face. And next, fifth one is the point A and point B relationship. When you are doing for a double jaw surgery, the point A and B. So we cannot do a complete advancement or a setback of the mandible. So when both maxilla and mandible has to be addressed, then it needs an anterior-posterior rotation of the maxilla. There are point A and point B relationship, how we are going to alter. So by altering the position, we are altering the structures above the point A and the structures below the point B. The pogonion position can be changed, and above the point A, the maxilla, the infraorbital rim, this position also can be altered. That is the pitch orientation. That is the front and back, there's a pitch orientation. First is the yaw, then the can correction, and the pitch orientation. It is the fifth assessment. And next is while moving the maxilla superiorly, sometimes the piriform rim has to be deepened. Sometimes the piriform rim has to be deepened, and to get a improve the airway, or the floor of the nose has to be extended, or the nasal spine morphology has to be altered. The decision has to be made at the clinical assessment stage. And next is the assessment of the baseline chin morphology. That is the 7th parameter. And combining all, whether we need to do a segmentation of the maxilla, whether the anterior maxilla has to be segmented or the posterior maxilla has to be segmented. So that has to be decided. So pre-surgical orthodontic has to be done properly. The teeth should be in the element 1 relationship. In spite of that, if we need a widening of the maxillary arches, segmentation has to be planned. These are the 8 key steps to be made or assessed before in case of a pre-surgical planning of the patient. Coming to the element 2 of the Andrews orofacial harmony. Because why this element 2 holds important is that this element 2 analysis of Andrews is much accurate than the SNA and SNB positioning. So study shows that, there is a published article on this. So this anterior-posterior positioning in the sagittal positioning of analysis. So first what you do is that you take a clinical photograph in the natural head position with the 1:1 ratio, and you make the points tracheon, superion, and the glabella. These 3 points are noted on the forehead, and all these 3 points are connected. So when you connect these 3 points, then you take a midpoint between the superion and the glabella. Superion is the anterior most point of the forehead, and tracheon is the superior most portion of the forehead, that is between the hairline and the forehead skin. So between superion and glabella, you draw a midpoint, and through the midpoint, a vertical line is dropped to the floor. So that is because if the head is in the natural head position, so it drop a vertical line, and the angle formed between that line above is called as the forehead inclination angle. Forehead, everybody able to see this picture clearly? Forehead inclination angle, that is above the this vertical line drop. This vertical line is called as forehead anterior limit line, that is called as fall, FALL, fall. So forehead anterior limit line is called fall. So this line is dropped through the midpoint of the superion and the glabella. And you drop another parallel line to the fall, that is called as the gall, that is a goal anterior limit line. Goal anterior limit line is called as the gall. So that equation to know how far anterior to the fall is that forehead inclination angle, which we measured, minus 7 into 6. This is the equation you have to do, and measure the position of the gall, that is a goal anterior limit line, that is a final position of the incisor, where exactly the incisor should be positioned, gall. And we drop a third line, is called as the dental anterior limit line, that is called as the DAL. So first is fall, then is gall, then another one is the DAL, dental anterior limit line. So through the anterior surface of the maxillary central incisor, it is a green line, you drop down through the anterior surface of the central incisor, provided the incisors are in element 1 relationship. So the distance between the green and the red line, that is between the gall and the DAL, is the amount of horizontal advancement of the maxilla. Amount of horizontal, it will give a very clear and accurate measurement of the maxillary advancement in case of the anterior-posterior deficiency of the maxilla. It's published in the Journal of 2018, JOMS. So that comes to the end of the lecture. So some famous quotes: we do not treat teeth, but rather a person who has teeth, and that in changing the faces of our patients, we are also certainly changing their lives. And facial aesthetic perfection is not a specific millimeter distance or a degree of angulation, but a visual impression at conversational distance in three-dimensional life. So the ultimate goal of any orthodontic surgeon or aesthetic surgeon to get the golden ratio accomplished according to the Euclidean facial proportions through the orthognathic surgery to reach the canon of beauty, that is the ideal facial proportions, they say, by a Greek sculpture called Polykleitos. So, which is depicted in nature on a mollusk, which is called Nautilus. That mollusk has a ideal golden ratios. So, it is a marine organism. So, which is having the shell has a ideal golden proportions. So, the aim of the surgeon should be to reach that golden proportion. But not many times the best of the portraits by the Leonardo da Vinci also does not satisfy the ideal facial portraits, facial proportions. Thank you.
Dr. Saravakumar irukara? Saravakumar? SK? SK லைன்ல இருக்கியா?
சார் ஆமாங்க சார், நாளைக்கு அலுவலகம் இருக்கு.
Thank you. What are man? What are man? வேணா. போட்டோ எடுப்போம். திவ்யா பாரதியோட ஒரு போட்டோ.
சார் எங்களோட அசோசியேஷனோட ஃபர்ஸ்ட் அபிஷியல் வவுச்சர் புக் அண்ட் ரிசிப்ட் சைன் பை யூ சார். Nice. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Sir, I can inform you.
Sure, sir.
Thank you.
Done. SK சரவணகுமார் இருக்காரா இல்ல ஆன் பண்ணி வச்சுட்டு போயிட்டாரா? அழகப்பன்?
Yes, sir.
Okay, யார் இருக்கீங்க? ஸ்கிரீனை ஆன் பண்ணுங்க. Let us have a small discussion because it's a very big topic and it's a very important topic. Let us have a small discussion. எல்லாம் ஆன் பண்ணுங்க. இப்ப யாருமே ஆன் பண்ணுங்கன்னா எல்லாருமே யாருமே பக்கத்துல இல்லையா? இது பக்கத்துல டேய் அவன் மட்டும் தனியா பேசினானா எவ்வளவு நேரம்? ஏய் சுபாஷ் மட்டும்தான் வந்திருக்கான்பா. சுபாஷ் மட்டும்தான் இருக்கான். வெரி ஸ்டூடியஸ் அண்ட் இன்டெலிஜென்ட் பாய், ஆல்வேஸ் அட்டென்டிவ். வேற யாருமே இப்ப we can have a discussion. Come.
Yes, sir. Recording stop பண்ணாம இருக்கட்டும் sir.
Recording தேவையில்லை. Recording we can stop.
Okay.
2 minutes wait பண்றேன். இந்த கால்குலேஷனை நாகாலாண்ட கால்குலேட் பண்ணி தர சொல்லு. நாகாலாண்ட கால்குலேட் பண்ணி தர சொல்லு. ஒரு கம்ப்ளீட்டா உட்கார்ந்து நாகாலாண்ட கால்குலேட். ஏய் யார்ப்பா இருக்கீங்க கேமரால?
Vaishali, just recording notice.
Okay. Really, Subhash எங்க? Oh, Harushi. விஷ்ணு குமார்ன்றது யாரு? சரவணா